Melissa Buffin is a registered and licensed pediatric occupational therapist and creator of the Peace of Mind parenting community, which provides families neurosensory-based online resources and courses, community, and live support. She's a Golden Bell Award of Excellence recipient from the California School Boards Association for Early Intervention program at Del Mar School District. Dr. Ulrick Vieux is a certified child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist who serves as section chief of the Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Division at Hackensack University Medical Center in New Jersey. He has an extensive history in working with professional and amateur athletes ranging from the NFL to middle school. Gabe Watson is Director of Fitness and Athletics at Beacon College in Leesburg, Florida, the nation's first accredited baccalaureate institution dedicated to educating neurodivergent students with learning and attention issues. Watson holds bachelor's and master's degrees in physical education and has coached men's basketball at both the high school and college level. And we're going to start our conversation with Melissa. Melissa, movement is the first way that humans learn and interact with the world, so sports seems like a perfect fit. But in your experience, is it common for children with learning and attention issues to also have physical challenges that can complicate their participation in sports?
Daryl, such a great question. The thing that I see as a pediatric occupational therapist the most is challenges with motor planning. So when that happens, kids sometimes have difficulty with the initiation, sequencing, and execution of a motor plan or a motor movement. So something that looks simple to us can be very challenging to them. So if you say, oh, go bat the ball at Little League, there's a lot of complex steps involved in that. So different things that we work on are really using strategies like chunking skills. I know that's very, very clinical, but basically breaking it down into small pieces, allowing them to feel success, like walking up to the plate. Where do your feet go? Where do your hands go on the bat? That's a huge piece that you can practice. And as soon as we feel success with that, we can continue to build on it so that community-based sports aren't so overwhelming for kids that have motor planning challenges. Another quick strategy is visuals. So when my husband was actually the softball coach for our community, when I would go and help different teammates that I saw struggling, we would put X's on the field exactly where they were supposed to stand or put their feet. So visual supports can help with that as well. So it's really that motor planning piece that we can see kids get tripped up on, but a lot of strategies can foster success pretty quickly as well.
All right. And Dr. Vieux, can you elaborate a bit on some of the specific cognitive and emotional benefits that children who are neurodivergent reap from participating in organized sports?
Thank you. And first, I think it's really important for us to kind of define what we're talking about when we talk about neurodivergent. Or we talk about specifically ADHD, autism, dyslexia, some learning disorders as well. So one of the challenges that we have with children that have these what I call special gifts. I mean, this is what I say to my patients is that this presentation comes in a spectrum. So they can be a very challenging perspective that some of these kids may display. But one of the things that we need to kind of work with is helping these kids deal with the social communication that's important in dealing with sports. So it gives them an advantage, an opportunity to practice those essential social skills. Another aspect is actually being active. Being active is a really important aspect in actually helping contain some of these activities, because fundamentally, if you look at ADHD, one of the challenges of people with ADHD is this inability to focus, this ability to have so much energy, but not necessarily knowing how to put that energy in an effective manner. And participation in sports, due to the organization, due to the importance of following rules, ability to communicate with peers, that is an essential aspect. It provides a skill to practice learning these key differences.
All right. So, Gabe, can you tell me about some of the common misconceptions surrounding children who have learning and attention issues when it comes to sports?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is that there are differences. That they think there's major differences. For instance, we were tasked 2 years ago to create athletics here at the college, and one of the questions that I've got so many times was from athletic directors and coaches. Okay, we've read a little bit about your school. What are going to be some of the challenges that we face, and what are some of the differences that we're going to see? But I let them know that our students are just as smart as anybody else. They're very intelligent, different things like that. And so sometimes it's just with our students, it's just something they communicate differently or they just think differently. And so when you're on the court, really you're judged by how you're performing. And so when you're out on the playing surface and playing, your playing does the talking. And that's kind of the motto. I tell them we're going to be just like everybody else. A lot of our students are way smarter than me, and they correct me all the time when I'm doing something wrong, and they help me. So there's just learning. You fear what you don't know. And so you're just really, I spend a lot of time just educating people on what kind of college we are, because, we've never had sports before. So we're really just introducing our college to a lot of different places and really explaining to them the misconceptions that are out there, that our students are just like everybody else.
Okay. So, Melissa, in your experience as an occupational therapist, are there sports that are better suited to children with learning and attention issues?
Well, just like Dr. Vieux said, it really is child specific, and everything different neurodivergent differences are on a large spectrum. So it is very custom to that child. However, I would say something that I've experienced the most in my practice is that if a child is struggling or if they're just getting into sports, what we do is we do kind of coach the parent, pick something that, of course, that the child is interested in, is highly motivated to participate in. But we do say to kind of look at more of the individual sports first. So examples of that would be like gymnastics, karate, swimming, where the child is learning the skill and they can really build, again, their confidence in that area. And then as they, go on through childhood, if they are interested in sports, maybe after they get some of the foundational skills like eye-hand coordination and different tasks like that, then they can look at more of the team type sports where there's a lot more to keep track of, like soccer or basketball, where not only do you have to perform yourself, but you also have to know where all your teammates are, where they're going to be in the next 5 seconds, and then coordinate your movements with them. So we do coach parents on going from a more individualistic based sport, but still can be on a team, to more complex sports that have more skills going on simultaneously.
Thank you. So, Dr. Vieux, you often hear parents say, I'm going to get my kid enrolled in karate so that he can gain discipline. Can you talk to me about how kids who have learning and attention issues might be able to improve, say, their attention, their focus, and their impulse control by engaging in organized sports?
Well, the fundamental issue with a lot of these neurodivergent diagnoses is what we call the dopamine hypothesis. So there's a belief that what's happening is that there's a lower level of dopamine. The thing about this with these neurotransmitters, when you are physically active, that actually increases these neurotransmitters. So it is not uncommon to see a child that has ADHD after they are participating in a sport, whether it's karate, whether it's running track, whether it's playing football, 2 to 3 hours after the sport, they're actually able to focus. So it just kind of goes back to that understanding of what is actually happening from a chemical perspective. So I think one of those things that we are speaking to parents, actually explaining the neurobiology that is happening when kids are active in sports, that in itself gives an indication of why athletics plays a role. And going back to what was said, I mean, you do have to understand what is the ideal sport for your child. I mean, you may have to do some trial and error. Maybe at first focusing on the individual sports where you focusing on some of the abilities, the visual abilities that's needed for sports, focusing on that part initially, then progressing to more of the team sports that can also be effective. Because one of the advantages of actually working within a team is the ability to kind of understand, learn from other individuals. Because one thing that you'll see with a lot of kids who have neurodivergent challenges is that these kids are profoundly empathic, very empathic. So I think this ability to understand others is also an advantage that kids that are neurodivergent can also further develop their personal skills. Learning from that and taking advantage of that special ability, which is what I often say to my patients that you have.
All right. So, Gabe, one of the things that seems to be a common theme among children with learning and attention issues is this feeling of being excluded because they feel different or they're treated different. Can you talk to me about how sports can help foster this sense of inclusion and community among neurodivergent athletes who participate?
Well, it's incredible because, the playing does the talking, and it's an overwhelming sense of being a part of something. Nobody cares about learning differences when you're on the court. Nobody cares if you got dyslexia or ADHD. They don't care. None of that matters. It's not even an issue that never crosses anybody's mind. It doesn't cross our coach's mind. And so it's an incredible sense of not focusing on what may be a challenge in life, but focusing on a different talent that you have. And so I remember when I played in high school, we had a student, he struggled very much in the classroom. And this was 25 years ago. There wasn't a whole lot of, not as much knowledge about things. And so we didn't know what was going on with him, but he had a lot of issues learning. He struggled a lot, but man, when he got out on that basketball court, all that just went away. And he couldn't learn plays. He struggled with a lot of stuff, but when he got out there and when the lights came on, he was ready to go. And none of that mattered. And we loved him. We didn't think anything negative about him. In fact, it was just the opposite because his playing really did the talking. And he was a superstar. And that was kind of a sense of identity. And it helped him in the classroom. And I think that's what helps as well. This sense of inclusion, it really benefits in the classroom because it's accountability system, I think, is a key thing. It's accountability system to do things the right way, to participate in your classes, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you for sharing that story. So, Melissa, as an occupational therapist, how do you deal with the unique sensory needs of neurodivergent athletes in the context of an organized sports setting? I mean, they have to have some accommodations, I would imagine, sometime to be able to perform successfully.
Absolutely. That can be a big challenge. So when a sensory need is identified and we're trying to figure out how to enable the child to participate in anything, and specifically sports, where sometimes there's less control over your environment, which is where all of our sensory inputs come from. And so basically there's a couple things we can do. One is to minimize anxiety. We always tell our parents to front load. So you can talk about exactly what the sensory situation is going to be. So, it's going to be bright today. It's going to be windy today. It's going to be cold. Those are all things that can be, alarming and alerting or cause some distress. So I do believe in front loading, and we always coach our parents to kind of talk about exactly what it's going to look like to minimize anxiety. So that's kind of step one. Step two is basically going, I always say, like, if you could go to the baseball or basketball or whatever your sport is alone. So without the crowd, without the team, and, do common practice skills or drills with minimized sensory input, just to, again, build confidence. And so then as you add in those other pieces and those other sensory components, there's already a kind of a baseline of comfort there. So between front loading and then kind of minimizing sensory input and practicing, I think those set up the child for success. And then there are a lot of just tools out there, mainstreamed and popular stores these days that are known from a sensory perspective to calm the nervous system. Two off the top of my head are, they just released a new earplug where you can actually hear, but I think it cuts out 50%. So you can use tools like that also just to enable full participation. So earplugs. And the other thing we do recommend a lot is compression clothing. It goes along the same lines as a weighted blanket. It's just known for the sensory system to be very calming. So a lot of kids will wear compression t-shirts and things like that under their uniforms, and nobody even has to know, but that can be also a calming tool. So lots of different ways to approach that and support it.
So Dr. Vieux, continuing to drill down on the benefits that children who learn differently derive from playing organized sports, can they develop essential life skills such as teamwork and communication by being involved in this?
The answer is yes. And one of the key things is that sports gives you the ability to feel comfortable in your skin. So one of the challenges that we have with our children that have autism spectrum disorder is what we call masking or camouflaging, in that there's this desire to try to assimilate within the crowd as much as possible. So oftentimes these kids will mask some of their behavior. But the beauty of sports is that you can be completely free. So within that self, that perspective of being comfortable with yourself, it enables you to have the skills to be able to reach out to other people and actually form really solid relationships. So I think that's another advantage of playing sports, or whether it's an individual sport or whether it's a team sport, but actually being able to apply these skills.
All right, thank you. So Gabe, we've obviously been talking a lot about sports, but in the larger context, when you're trying to integrate children who learn differently into team sports, are there any challenges or considerations that we need to be thinking about, both from a parent and a coaching perspective?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is each one's different, and each one is going to respond differently. And it's up to you, to the parent, the coach, to communicate with that student athlete and help them understand what it is you're trying to tell them. And because there can be a lot of miscommunication, and there can be a lot of, I've personally experienced a lot of failure trying to do things a certain way. There's not a lot of formulas that you have, because when emotions run deep, if you have a child with high anxiety, attention deficit disorder, and they're struggling, it's important for you to really know how to address this situation and be as calm as you can. And for example, there was one instance that happened. We had a player that was having trouble. He would shut down right in the middle of the game and maybe cry or act out. And so the thing that I first did was I was like, hey, what's going on? Hey, and trying to reason the situation. And other people were there. They were trying to reason the situation. Well, it just kind of made things worse. And everything was kind of escalating, because, I wouldn't want somebody asking me a bunch of questions, everybody around. And so I failed in that instance, but I learned something about the student that I should have learned earlier. I've got to find a different technique. I got to shut my mouth and open my ears. And that's always important, is to listen to what they're telling you. And so the next time this happened, the reaction was to get the student away from everyone and get them alone and just tell them, listen, and say, I understand. So that was happening, and people would come over. I'd say, no, get away. I'm talking. And they just had to get it all out. Once they got it all out, they were great. And they wanted to go back. And I was like, well, are you sure you're okay? Because last time this took an hour. This time it's taken a few minutes. But they just got to get whatever it is off their chest. Maybe it's, they put lipstick on the wrong earlier and it's affecting them. It could be little things like that, and you have no idea. So it's important to listen to what they're telling you and let them get out what they're going to do. And then there's other players that are completely different. They may need different reactions. So you got to be attentive to what their needs are at that moment.
All right, thank you, Gabe. So, Melissa, we've been touching on it off and on throughout our conversation, but let's put a finer point on it. Can you tell us what role an occupational therapist has in this conversation about neurodivergent athletes?
Absolutely. Well, first, I wanted to just share that I don't think that there is any profession, of course, I'm biased, that is more supportive of movement through learning through movement. It's really how kids should be developing anyway, all kids, and it is such a phenomenal tool for neurodivergent kids as well. So the more movement, the better. And if we can make that successful and a positive experience, that's our job, and that's the goal. And so just including movement as much as possible throughout learning, academics, and sports, it's just huge. And OTs see that and support that. And I think that there is so much space for OTs to be more involved in the sports community. And the way that we can do that is what we're really good at is something that we call task analysis. So we look at exactly, we can take the simplest task that looks like, a kid walking up to compete in in swimming. You're like, oh, there you go, just go get up on the diving block, and we can break that down into 10 little pieces. So OTs can bring to the table, okay, what are those 10 pieces? Are we successful? How do we build on top of it? So it's this task analysis, and that has to do with the motor planning piece that we talked about earlier. Then we look at the environment and we say, what are the sensory demands? Gabe had a great point. That was such a phenomenal example from my OT perspective of, there was this huge social and emotional thing happening to that player, but there was also a sensory thing happening, and taking them out of that and minimizing the sensory experience probably enabled them to then access that higher level social skill. And OTs can help other providers and things understand those pieces. So it's really the task analysis of the environment and then the task demands that can really help facilitate success in sports. And I see such a huge role for OT in that altogether.
All right. So, Dr. Vieux, let's get down to brass tacks here. So, I'm a parent, and my son, who is neurodivergent, comes up to me and says, Dad, I want to be the next Michael Jordan. So, what advice do you have for parents whose children want to get involved in sports, or parents who think that putting their kids into sports is a good thing?
Well, first, I want to say I completely agree with what my colleagues have mentioned about the importance of seeing this from a team perspective, i.e. PT, OT, and as well as as a head coach. And yes, in my practice, I work with children, I work with adolescents, also work with professional athletes. And the reality of the matter is, if you look at the professional athlete perspective, there was a study that stated that maybe 3 to 5% of our population as a whole has ADHD. But if you look at baseball players, high school baseball players, that number goes up to 7 to 9%, even 10%. If you look at actual college athletes, 8% are on some type of medication, i.e., what I'm saying that even with your elite athletes, and even if you look at our top NBA players or our top NFL players, when we talk about these GOATs, G-O-A-T, greatest of all time, what's the first thing we talk about? We talk about how these people were so passionate about their field, about how they were so detail oriented, And so yes, there's definitely an advantage that our neurodivergent kids play in actually being able to do elite sports. But with that said, you have to put things into proper perspective. The number one goal with a child or adolescent that has a neurodivergent diagnosis, for lack of a better word, is one, being able to be comfortable and learning more about yourself. The focus should not be the kind of elite sport. First thing is taking step by step, one step at a time. What I often say to a lot of my athletes, let's take it one win at a time. So I think that should be the focal point, because the point of the sports, it should be an adjunct. It should be a way to kind of minimize the anxiety, the stress that a lot of our patients already have. So that's one of the things I'm a little bit concerned when I'm working with a ADHD kid who's a baseball player and their dream is to be in the major leagues. Let's take one step at a time. Actually enjoy what you're actually doing. So that's the first thing that I would say to a parent that's coming to me talking about how they can help their child reach the zenith of their potential. Understanding that perspective, putting it in its proper frame, because again, one of the things that we really have to look at with the ADHD population is that when they feel passionate about something. And that's like one of the misnomers that people have with ADHD. They think that, well, people with ADHD, they can never really focus on things. That's not completely true. It is not uncommon for a kid that's ADHD that can spend 7 to 10 hours playing video games. It's not uncommon for a kid with ADHD or OCD can do 500 to 700 foul shots prior to a basketball game. So they're able to really focus on things that they feel passionate about. So as the team looks at that specific student, the focus should be, how can we empower that person and make sure that the activity that they're engaging in is something that they fully enjoy.
All right. Thank you, Doctor. So Gabe, you get to have the final word today. So we talked about strategies for parents, but when the kids are sent out to the baseball field, the soccer fields, they're going to be encountering coaches. What are some strategies coaches can use to better support neurodivergent athletes?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, and I don't even want to limit it to neurodivergent students, but I think the biggest thing is putting yourself in their shoes, helping understand that. That's always helped me a lot to understand, because it's simple human emotion. Sometimes, a lot of times, our students are very forthright with their emotions, but we, different people that may not have learning disabilities, they're good at hiding emotions. And we tend to hide emotions more, but our students are really out there. They tell you exactly what's going on. And so I think the biggest thing is how would you want to be treated in that moment? That really helps as a coach to understand, because you really want to create an atmosphere for failure. And so what I mean by that, it's like Michael, you talked about Michael Jordan earlier today. He talked about all the shots that he missed, all the times that he failed. And but everybody focuses on the things that he succeeded. And that's what we try to do here, is we try to help our students realize the accomplishments that they are making, because they tend to hyper-focus on the failures. But they don't realize how much they're actually accomplishing, and how much, like, for instance, in 2 years, we've organized sports here. And a lot of that is due to the initiative of our own students here, telling us what they need, forming committees to create things that they like. And so it's just incredible, the progress. And so that's the biggest thing, is creating an atmosphere that is conducive to allow failures and to pick them up and to remind them what the positives are.
All right, that is going to have to be the period on a very engaging and compelling conversation. Melissa Buffin, Dr. Ulrick Vieux, and Gabe Watson. Thanks for the knowledge.